General Menke, the Minnesota National Guard, our pilots, and the air crew that was with us today on this flight re-emphasize the point of National Guard serves a dual mission. Their federal mission under Title 10 duty is federal, but Title 32 is in state support. So the Blackhawks you saw, the aircraft able to do multiple tasks today, was able to take Senator Klobuchar, myself, our team, to get a broader view of the damage, especially in south central Minnesota. Went down over Henderson, which pretty extensive damage on roads. Doesn't look like quite as many personal structures, but of course some farms underwater. Continued on down to Le Sueur. Again, same type of thing, roads closures. The Commissioner Doppelberger can talk about 169 closing to up to Le Sueur from Mankato. Continued on through St. Peter, which of course along the river there, but not a lot of, it didn't look like homes flooded, but a lot of roads closed in and around the area. North Mankato, of course out to Rapidan, the dam is still intact, but you can see the immense flow of water around it, and then over to through Elysian to Waterville. And I think I'll each of folks, just to give impressions on this, the folks will give you the details and the damage assessment, what they're seeing, but the human impact was certainly in Waterville, many more homes. The impact certainly feels pretty dramatic with up to the second floor, and I would estimate dozens and dozens of homes, and certainly a lot of wet basements on that. So this incident, we caught a little bit of a break on lack of rain. It's sunny out today, but a lot of water. And then I think you'll hear again from Commissioner Peterson with the Ag Department. I think the thing that struck me, and I'll let others speak for themselves, was just the number of fields and looked like crop damage that's out there. So as we've said to Minnesotans, first and foremost, continue to stay safe. Do not drive around these barriers. The process of starting to clean up, and that will simultaneously happen with damage assessments. There is a set process on how this works. We are incredibly lucky that our local emergency managers, our first responders, they understand this well, and we're doubly lucky that we have federal partners that understand clearly the process of sending up a federal request for a declaration, what that means, and then that starts to kick in the process of rebuilding. But I think we're not out of the woods yet. Water levels are still rising. We don't have the National Weather Service folks with us, but we have not reached peak water levels in many of these communities yet, and so that is going to add to this. Again, if weather holds, it looks like rain on Friday type of thing, that will give us some reprieve, but it's pretty extensive damage. A lot of folks doing good work, and I would just say the Senator we were marveling at, as you brought up, the loss of power out of a small hydroelectric plant, of course, at Rapidan, but not small for 600 families. It's their energy needs, and XL getting down there on the ground, setting up a temporary station, restoring power, all of those things that need to go into place. So at this point in time, pretty extensive damage, pretty widespread. We don't have and won't have for a little while the assessment on the road damage, what's happening to some of those bridges. They all need to be inspected again before we open back up those roads. Commissioner, if maybe we'll be able to give some idea on that. But again, just grateful Senator Klobuchar has been out. She was down yesterday on the ground. A thank you to our other federal partners, Congressman Finstead yesterday, and was in contact with Congresswoman Craig before we went on this. They're back in session in D.C., but both are, and their representatives are on the ground. So with that, Senator Klobuchar.
All right. Thank you so much, Governor, for your leadership, and thank you to you and General Menke for giving me a ride. I think once again, when I get out there and you look from above and you're on the street level, seeing in Waterville with those 70,000 sandbags put together by volunteers in just a few days, that these raging rivers don't divide us, they unite us in Minnesota. They unite us in looking out for our neighbors. The fact that no one has died yet, when you look at that water, when you look at that dam, that people have been following the rules, and it's frustrating, I know. Some of these roads are closed down. I heard the story this weekend when I was out with Senator Smith and Representative Craig of one guy that decided he'd go around the barricades. Luckily he lived, but he doesn't have his car anymore. So I think it's a reminder to follow these rules. The waters are shifting, things are changing. From the federal level, it's our job to step in if the federal threshold is met for the state. I am not an engineer, but looking at that dam and seeing the severe damage there as well as washed out roads in Minnesota, I believe we could well be into our 10.5 million. That is the level at which federal aid would tick in for public infrastructure. When that's triggered, after a declaration, request and declaration, then 75% of that public infrastructure is paid for by the federal government on a county-by-county basis. So for instance, Blue Earth, where the dam is, that's over 300,000. That's all they have to hit. The state has been incredible, both under this governor and the last governors, in figuring out how to do a somewhat unique fund so that that kicks in for our 25% share, but also for counties that may have significant damage but not meet those thresholds. So we've been through this before. That maybe isn't a good thing, but it certainly makes for some experienced local, state, and federal officials in terms of knowing what to do. Every single stop I've taken, I have heard the locals say, we're keeping our receipts, we're keeping our receipts, because they know that means that federal help is on the way with the state guidance and the state leadership and the state matching funds. So again, as the governor said, when you look at that dam and the rushing waters, when you see the flooded farmland and the work that will have to be done there and the potential for farmers' help with the Farm Bill, you know our work is far from done. But I continue to be impressed by the leadership of our first responders and the citizens of Minnesota who really stand up and do their part, and even if their house is okay, they go help a neighbor. We've got to keep this spirit up through the coming days.
Thanks, Senator.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Hey, good afternoon. I'm Major General Sean Mankey, the Adjutant General of the Minnesota National Guard, and I'd just like to echo the governor's comments. You know, we are a dual-purpose National Guard. So we have our federal mission and we have our state mission. And the equipment that we operated today for the aerial overflight, many of these aircraft have been deployed to the Middle East to serve in our federal mission, and we train with these aircraft every day for our federal mission. But when we need them for our state mission, we have them, and we, through the governor's order, will put them on state active duty and able to do other things to help in the local fight. So it's a uniqueness of the National Guard and something that truly benefits us all. So we use our federal dollars to obtain our equipment, and then we can use them if needed, God forbid, in a state emergency, just like we did today. A little update on what the Guard's doing in the community. We got over 40 soldiers deployed to Waterville. They're manning 7 pump stations, I think 14 pumps, making sure that they operate 24/7 to protect critical infrastructure in people's houses, making sure they don't plug up, making sure they have fuel and everything else like that. In addition, we're opening one of our armories, the Faribault Armory, for emergency shelter, partnering with a good partner of ours, the Red Cross, who will help us open up that facility if needed for families to seek refuge and a little comfort in this very difficult time. That's about it for the Minnesota National Guard update. I'll be followed by Commissioner Peterson.
Thanks, General.
Thank you, General. Again, Tom Peterson, Commissioner, Minnesota Department of Agriculture, and Governor and I were just talking about it's hard to wrap your mind around what we just saw. I think that for me, you know, being, as the Senator said, when you're up in the air and as opposed to on the road, you know, the crops look great from the road, but up in the air, it really shows the widespread difficulties our farmers face. You know, we saw a lot of those acres that never got planted this year had to get replanted, and then you see a lot of those fields are going to struggle in the coming days and weeks. And so really thoughts with those farmers. To that being said, our administration is working closely with the USDA. And as the governor said, as we look at a presidential designation, we also are looking with the USDA on localized designations and secretarial designations on a county-by-county basis. The best thing a farmer can do is if they have a problem or they have an issue on their farm is to go into their county office and report that damage, whether that is crop loss, whether that's water in fields, whether that's damage to their livestock facility. We need them to go in to their local county office and report that. That helps us determine the loss threshold, and that will in turn help unlock those federal and state programs that are so important to farmers. I also want to mention there's a lot of question about crop insurance that those farmers have, and I always want to remind folks that crop insurance doesn't make our farmers whole. It's an important safety net, and as Senator Klobuchar said, it highlights the need and the importance of a farm bill. And then a lot of our farmers, I also noticed, we got closer to the city, some of our vegetable farms that are drowned out or facing, a lot of those folks don't have any crop insurance, but we encourage them again to report their losses for further programs if there are some. I also wanted to mention that our Department of Agriculture has updated a new website with resources for flooding issues that farmers and Minnesotans have that are related to agriculture at our state website. I also wanted to mention, as we looked in really on the southeast part of the state, tomorrow I'll be in southwest Minnesota, in the Jackson, Heron Lake, Windham areas where they've also had many issues too as well. We also wanted to address real quickly too that we're aware of the 17 feedlots that have overflowed in southwest Minnesota on 15 different locations. Those feedlots, working closely with the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, did not discharge into bodies of water, but rather out onto fields, and that was mostly stormwater with some manure. And at this time, too, there's no reported fish kills or anything like that, but we're monitoring that situation as close as possible. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Bob Jacobson. I'm the Commissioner of Public Safety for the state of Minnesota. I want to thank also Governor Walz for his leadership. I want to thank the National Guard today for the opportunity to be able to tour, get the aerial view of what's happening across the state of Minnesota. It really brings it to light. You really realize that all of these farmers, all of these roads, all of these businesses, all of these residents, the real people, real businesses that are suffering right now because of an incredible amount of flooding that's going on around the state of Minnesota. And again, our best wishes out to those groups. I also want to thank and compliment our first responders that are out there and our emergency managers who are working diligently, constantly to try to help those who have been impacted by flooding. The Department of Public Safety, one of our responsibilities is to help coordinate resources out of the State Emergency Operations Center. As you know, the State Emergency Operations Center is activated and operating. There are currently no unmet needs. So as we support local, county governments on their response and recovery, if they need assistance, we are there to assist. Right now, we have no unmet needs from across the state of Minnesota, whether it be sandbags, whether it be resources, whether it be people. So we are ready and we are working toward that goal. As we do that, we are also paying attention to whether or not this can be a federal disaster declaration. As the governor has mentioned and Senator Klobuchar, I really think that this is going to meet the needs for a federal declaration. We are working right now. FEMA is on the ground with us in our State Emergency Operations Center. They were part of our some of our meetings already today. We are making sure that they're aware. We're also starting to do initial damage assessments in northern Minnesota. Today was a focus in southern Minnesota. We have not forgotten about those who are in northern Minnesota suffering right now as the flooding issues continue. The water is starting to recede, doing those initial damage assessments, putting that together, and we will start doing that as best we can in southern Minnesota right away, just to make sure that we are keeping the federal government and FEMA aware of where we stand on potential damages. But we are there ready to assist. We have people in place. We are meeting the needs right now for our partners out there in the field, and we'll continue to be there for Minnesotans for as long as they need us. With that, I'll turn it over to...
Great. We'll see if anything's going to... We have Commissioner of Transportation here, too, if we have any specific questions, but really grateful for all of this, and I think what you heard was protection and safety on the front end, start to do damage assessment, and this process of requesting a emergency and everything that goes into that is very deliberate, and steps have to be taken in order. And as Senator Klobuchar said, whether it's unfortunate or fortunate, we're good at it, and we know what has to happen. So these things are happening simultaneously. As the waters recede in the north, we can get our crews doing that, and then we'll start in the south. With that, any questions?
Would there be a simple disaster declaration or a single package aid for?
Yeah, and I'll let the experts get on this, that you always want to make it, because they will try and at times say these are separate incidents for separate storms or whatever. The federal government is usually really good. The advocacy that we have in this to make the case that all of this is a single ongoing incident, and that has happened in the past with rainstorms and flooding, that one thing adds to the other. So I think the hope is a single declaration.
Exactly. And we have numbered dozens of counties affected, and we don't even know that it's done yet. And Cook is a long way away from Henderson or from Blue Earth County, so we know that. Even last year, people maybe didn't notice those as much, but back in April, the declaration was in early summer. The aid started coming in weeks, and that was just barely had met that 10.5 million, and then we got 8-some million from the federal government even last year for floods. Another thing that we haven't noted is that through this process, Minnesota always has, over the years, gotten some flood mitigation funding. And if you talk to the mayor of Duluth, he just told me that what they did in 2012 when they had a big flood helped them from having anything bad happen this time. You look at what Austin has done, where they've moved homes. You've looked at what's happened in small communities in our state when they strengthen their levees. Over time, you can see one town gets hit and another one doesn't, because maybe for some way they were able to get grants funding or the will to make improvements. And so that's what we have to keep doing, so we do know that we save communities in future flooding when we do something now preventative.
Anyone else?
So as I understand the question, it's about the Rapidan Dam, and if there's any other...
Are there any other
Are there any other dams? Right now, there's no other dams that are in imminent danger. There may be some others that we're keeping an eye on, but right now we think we're okay. And again, as you've heard, the Rapidan Dam we think is going to continue to hold up. But there are going to be more assessments in the future as to that structure.
There will be county-by-county declarations that the Secretary issues. If there's a presidential declaration, that would supersede that. And so we're going on both tracks right now as we gather information. So I can't emphasize again enough for farmers to go in and report those damages as we go through both of those processes. We met with as the administration with the USDA today to go through that process, and we are getting reports in to those counties. There's a threshold to hit of 30% of a crop loss by county to hit that, and that can be one crop though that can trigger the disaster declaration in that county. And that's pretty normal. We have I think 12 counties are already in disaster declaration for previous weather events that had to do with rain earlier in the year that farmers are eligible. So again, really encourage farmers to report those acres and go into their county offices to ask if they're eligible for any of those programs.
Go ahead, Cindy.
I just hear, what was it?
What sort of new insight do you guys get from the aerial survey that's not?
You go first.
Yeah, and I think you got to be careful with the experts going out there and seeing it, but I think the first thing is just the scope of it strikes you much more. You can listen to the number of acres, you can hear these things, but I think each of us were talking about the amount of standing water that's out there. And then I think when it doesn't seem like there's all that much water, or you see wondering what it did, like I'm thinking with that Rapidan Dam piece of it, the dam, I've been over that thing 100 times on my bike. That's the Red Jacket Trail that runs right by my house. I've been on it 100 times, and you don't think how close the dam was to the road that you're riding on, but watching it there, all the backswell, this is where I would go to DOT, those pilings for that major bridge, I wonder about that. So for me, it struck me that there's going to be such a desire to get things open again. None of those things can open until the engineers from MnDOT are out there checking the bridges. Is that correct? That's what struck me, and then I don't send it for
Yeah, I'll let Nancy go. But the two things that struck me was, first of all, the farmland, because when you're there on the ground, as I was the last few days, you actually don't see the farmland. And so that was number one. The second is what the governor was referring to, just how the roads look. I, for instance, when I got in the helicopter, thought, well, why is 169 closed? My husband and my daughter are going to see the in-laws up in Mankato. Does it really have to be closed? And when you see the water, you understand what's going on. So I really came away again with the reason that we have these rules and that we have MnDOT to set them.
Good afternoon. I'm Nancy Daubenberger. I'm the Commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Transportation. And first of all, I want to say, I want to echo the sympathy. My thoughts and prayers are with all those who are experiencing loss of crops, loss of property damage, loss of access. And our folks are out there taking a look at everything. So in southern Minnesota right now, it's still identifying what needs to be done in order to ensure public safety, but they are starting some of those damage assessments. More detailed damage assessments are going on in northern Minnesota, but our governor was talking about bridges. Certainly once the water recedes and lowers, in the case of a bridge, there are a number of different things to be inspected. Not only the structure, but when you have water moving this fast, this volume of water down the river, it can undermine the foundation as well. So these are things that need to be checked out to ensure bridge safety before we open them up. Also with the roads, of course, we need to wait till the water recedes to start assessing damage. And our governor mentioned 169, Highway 169 being underwater. We were watching that very closely because with the work that needed to be done several years ago, the elevation of the road was raised, and we were very hopeful that that would allow us, at least on the southbound lanes, to stay open. Unfortunately, last night we did need to close 169, so we'll be monitoring that. When the water recedes, we'll watch for damage, and we hope to open that up, and hope for no repairs needed and be able to open that up soon. Thanks.
Yeah, so we make our resources available, as do other public entities, schools, whatnot, and really partnering with the Red Cross. And it's hard to say. So I think it varies. I think that's an emergency shelter, but then there's other means where hopefully we can get them into some other kind of better shelter if their home is in fact lost than just one of our armories, because it's. A lot of our armories are like this, so it's open. You have bathrooms, whatnot, but I mean, you're in the cover. A lot of them are air conditioned, but we would partner with other agencies to try to get those people moved into other more permanent shelters as soon as feasible.
Governor, any plans for a special purpose legislation for state funding?
We'll see, and I say leave it open if that's necessary to make folks whole again and to get this fixed. Of course, we'll do that. We'll take a look. As I said, there's a process in this. Once it starts to unfold, we'll get a better idea of it. And I think probably that is the absolute definition of what a special session should be used for, an emergency situation where something was unanticipated to go. So I certainly leave it open to that if we need to do it, we'll do it.
What would result in calling?
Pardon me?
What kinds of things would result in calling?
Well, I think we would see if the damage was higher than maybe our account that's there. We have the Disaster Assistance Contingency account, and I think Senator Klobuchar brought up, quite possibly after safety, the most important part of this. When we build back, it's about mitigation, and the communities have done that. Owatonna, we've worked together on a lot of these. It might warrant doing that. If folks want to get going again and want to start building, I don't want to rush folks into having to rebuild something that we're going to have to do again. And I remind folks that you know, nature doesn't care whether you believe in climate change or not. The insurance companies sure believe in it. The actuarials sure believe in it. And we do, of trying to fix this. And I remind folks, when we did that on 169, and I don't want to speak out of turn, Nancy wasn't in at that time, but if I recall right, the engineers built that for a 500-year flood. That was 14 years ago. So the 500-year flood came in 14 years. And so I would think about something like that as we go in, things that needed to be done, if there's something we could do. But I would think if we're going to do something like that, to think about, you know, what does rebuilding look like, smart way to do it. We'll let the experts tell us, but I think that would be something. Well, thank you all. Yeah, please.
Which rivers is still watching? I've heard about Jackson.
Yeah, you guys want to, Bob, you probably should have our folks here with our brief.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, certainly areas around Jackson County, Windham are certainly areas that we're keeping an eye on. We are still watching Blue Earth County with Mankato and North Mankato areas. Waterville, certainly, we are keeping an eye on, and we had a really good aerial view of that today. The good news is that the water seems to be receding in northern Minnesota, so a lot of those rivers and tributaries that we've been watching, again, the good news is the weather has been cooperating, and it looks like the water levels are starting to go down. We think that some of the cresting of some of our more major rivers in southern Minnesota may not occur until Friday or Saturday. Again, weather dependent, but again, it looks like over the next couple of days we should be doing really well for weather. But those are the focus areas for us right now.
Thanks, folks.
Okay, thank
Okay,
you.
Jen.
Thanks, Governor.
Thanks, Senator.
Incredible.
Appreciate all your help.
Good work.
Thank you.
Hey.
Bob, appreciate it.
Thanks, Governor.
Yeah.